Echo 9 Bravo, taking heavy fire. We need immediate extraction. The desperate call crackled through the radio, but only silence came back. Captain Ethan Ward crouched behind jagged rock, his team trapped with no rescue in sight. Vega whispered a prayer, while Dana Cross scanned the fog, clutching her rifle in fear. Then, across the static, a calm female voice broke through. "I have your position. Hold fast." The men froze. Was it real, or just the mind's trick in the chaos of war? Seconds later, a single shot cracked the night, and the enemy muzzle flash went dark. In that moment, the myth became flesh. A ghost sniper, Serena Hale, was out there, and their lives now hung on her unseen trigger. The night pressed down on the valley like a weight. Fog rolled low over the jagged ridges, swallowing every sound and leaving only the irregular bursts of gunfire that cracked through the darkness. The men of Echo 9 Bravo, an elite Navy SEAL unit, were pinned against the stone, four shadows in the vast wilderness. Their radios hissed with static, each call for help drifting into the void with no answer. Echo 9 Bravo, taking heavy fire. We need immediate extraction. Captain Ethan Ward's voice was steady, clipped, trained by years of combat to remain calm even when the ground beneath him threatened to give way. Yet behind that steadiness was a truth he didn't voice. No one was coming. The transmission cut into silence. No friendly air support. No quick reaction force. The chopper that was supposed to pull them out had gone down miles short of the landing zone, its engine failure leaving the team stranded deep in hostile terrain. Now they crouched in a shallow depression, rocks barely high enough to shield them. Enemy fighters circling like wolves in the night. Corporal Lucas Vega Hayes pressed his back against cold stone, lips moving in a whisper. Not orders, not curses, just a prayer, half mumbled, half breathed. He wasn't the type to fold easily, but the sight lines were merciless here. High ground all around, muzzle flashes cutting through fog, and no escape route that didn't end in a kill zone. Petty Officer Dana Cross kept her rifle tight, eyes flicking through the mist. She had always been the sharpest shot in training, but even the sharpest shooter needed visibility. Tonight the fog had turned traitor, smothering her scope and turning the battlefield into a maze of shifting shadows. Her hands clenched around her weapon harder than she realized, knuckles pale under her gloves. Fear wasn't new. Fear was always there. But this was the kind that sat heavy in the chest, that made every breath feel borrowed. Ethan Ward glanced at both of them, reading their body language more than their faces. Good soldiers, reliable under fire. But no man or woman could deny the math. Outnumbered, cut off, ammo dwindling. Even the most disciplined mind calculates odds, and their odds were brutal. Another burst of gunfire rained down from the ridge, sparks kicking from stone inches from Ward's head. He ducked lower, exhaling through clenched teeth. 14 years in special operations, dozens of combat deployments, and still this moment felt different. Not just dangerous, final. Ward keyed the mic again, his voice harder now. Any station, this is Echo 9 Bravo Alpha, requesting immediate assistance. Grid coordinates 34.7251 north, 69.4384 east. Taking heavy fire. Compromised position. The radio hissed back nothing but emptiness. Dana Cross let out a shaky laugh, bitter and sharp. It's like screaming into a grave, as she muttered. Ward shot her a look, not to silence her, but to keep the despair from spreading. Words were contagious in a firefight. One phrase could unravel discipline faster than bullets. Eyes up, Ward ordered quietly. His tone was iron, but inside he felt the edges of fatigue and doubt press in. He thought of Silver Creek, the small hometown where he'd grown up, and the simple prayers he used to whisper as a boy before football games or exams. He found himself murmuring one now under his breath. Strange how the mind circles back in moments like these. Above them, the fog thickened, damp and heavy, choking the valley with a metallic tang of gunpowder. Shadows moved where the enemy was flanking. Ward's gut tightened. Every option he ran through ended the same way. A short fight, then silence. Vega shifted closer, voice low but insistent. "Captain, maybe it's time we think about..." He trailed off, but the unspoken word hovered, surrender. Ward's reply was immediate, clipped like a blade. We think about finishing the mission. Nothing else. His eyes stayed locked on the darkness, daring it to break. He couldn't afford doubt. Not in his team, not in himself. The silence that followed was louder than the gunfire. In that silence, every man felt the edge of mortality. Cross's breath hitched in rhythm with her heartbeat. Vega clutched the cross hanging under his vest, and Ward gritted his teeth against the pull of despair. Their SOS was gone into the void, unanswered. The valley seemed to mock them with its silence, the fog whispering back nothing. And somewhere deep inside, Ward understood. If help was coming, it would already be here. If they were going to live, they had to carve survival out of the darkness themselves. And yet, just as he braced for the enemy's final push, he couldn't shake the strange sense that something unseen lingered in that silence. Something waiting. The valley had fallen into that dreadful rhythm of firefights, the staccato bursts of rifles, the metallic ping of rounds striking rock, the hiss of radios spitting nothing but static. Echo 9. Bravo huddled low, pinned in bleeding time. The silence of unanswered calls gnawed at their morale like a slow knife. Then it happened. Echo 9 Bravo, I have your position. Hold fast. The voice cut through the static with surgical precision. Calm, unshaken, female. It was not the panicked bark of a nearby ally, nor the clipped authority of a command post. It was steady, measured, and terrifyingly certain. Every head snapped toward the radio. Petty Officer Dana Cross blinked hard as if she'd misheard. Was that? Corporal Lucas Vega. Hayes froze mid-prayer, eyes wide. That's a woman. Ward's jaw tightened. He felt his pulse jump despite himself. He'd been expecting silence, or maybe a garbled transmission. Not this. Not her. For a long second, the SEALs were statues, breathless in the fog. And then, as if the night itself leaned in to listen, the voice came again. Hostiles at bearing Aero 45, range 400 meters, elevated position behind the split boulder, secondary group moving at 3:15 using the dead tree for cover. The detail was impossible. No night vision could cut through this fog so clearly, and no casual operator could call bearings with that kind of surgical accuracy. Whoever she wasn't guessing. Ward pressed his radio to his lips, his voice a cautious growl. Identify yourself. What station is this? A pause, only the hiss of static, then blunt and cold. Because if I weren't friendly, you'd already be dead. Cross's breath caught in her throat. Vega muttered under his breath. No way. No way it's her. Her. Every man in special operations had heard the stories. A sniper who had appeared on impossible missions, dropped enemies from distances no ballistic table supported, saved entire units from annihilation, and then disappeared from the record as if she'd never existed. Some called her a ghost, others a myth conjured in bars at Bragg or Coronado. Most dismissed it as morale folklore, but those who swore they'd seen her, they called her by one name, the ghost sniper. Ward wanted to shut the thought out, but the seed had already taken root. He kept his voice steady. Copy. Overwatch. You're on our net. Where are you? Northeast Ridge. 1,800 meters. Clean sightlines. Thermal optics. I see everything you don't. Cross's eyes darted to Ward, disbelief etched in every line of her face. 1,800 meters? In this weather? That was well beyond what any rifle should deliver. And yet the confidence in her tone wasn't bravado. It was certainty. Vega exhaled like a man caught between faith and madness. Captain, this is her. It has to be her. Ward's mind whirred even as bullets cracked overhead. Logic told him to doubt. Protocol told him to distrust unknown operators. But instinct, the same instinct that had saved his life more than once, told him the truth. Whoever this woman was, she wasn't improvising. She was orchestrating. There was another current beneath the disbelief, one older and more corrosive. Cross felt it first, the sting of every muttered doubt she'd heard in training, every sidelong glance on deployment. Even now, surrounded by men she trusted with her life, she could feel the weight of the unspoken question. Can a woman really carry us through this? Ward had fought long enough to know the prejudice ran deep. For decades, combat had been framed as a man's arena. Women were medics, logisticians, pilots, maybe intel. But on the ground, in the mud and fog, facing the raw brutality of close-quarters battle, that was where even seasoned operators still whispered doubts. And yet here they were, 4 SEALs, pinned and cornered, and the calm, commanding voice guiding them belonged to a woman. It wasn't the first time history had bent like this. Women had fought in every war, though often erased in the retelling. Soviet sharpshooter Lyudmila Pavlichenko had 309 confirmed kills in World War II. Countless nurses in Vietnam had carried wounded men out of fire, unarmed but unyielding. And in Afghanistan and Iraq, women had flown combat sorties, commanded convoys, and yes, pulled triggers that saved lives. But still, the doubts lingered. Doubts born not of performance, but of culture. Ward glanced at Cross. Her jaw was tight, eyes glinting. She didn't need to say it. This voice vindicated every fight she'd had against those invisible walls. Another crack ripped across the valley. The men ducked instinctively, but it wasn't enemy fire. Somewhere far in the mist, a muzzle flash winked out like a candle snuffed in the dark. "Target down," the voice said, flat and clinical. "Cross, move northeast 20 meters to the Horseshoe Rocks. Ward, cover her. On my mark." It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. And against all training, against every regulation, Ward found himself obeying. He gave the nod. "Do it." Cross bolted across the open ground, tracer fire lacing behind her. Another crack, another flash gone. She slid behind the rocks, heart pounding, alive only because an unseen woman had decided it so. Vega whispered like he was in church. "She's real. My God, she's real." Ward keyed the mic, his voice quieter now. "Overwatch. Who are you?" For a moment, silence. Then almost a smile in her tone. "Ghosts don't give names, Captain. Now move your men." And just like that, the line between myth and reality blurred into nothing. The first shot had been enough to silence the valley, but it was only the beginning. "Cross, bound northeast 20 meters. Ward, give covering fire. On my mark." The order came through crisp and unwavering, cutting through the static like a scalpel. Dana Cross glanced at Ethan Ward, searching for confirmation, but her captain simply nodded. It went against every instinct to take commands from an unknown voice on the net, yet there was something in that calm tone that demanded obedience. "Mark." Cross sprinted across open ground. Muzzle flashes erupted from the slope, lighting up the fog with jagged streaks of red. Ward fired bursts in return, tracer arcs cutting through the haze, and then, crack, a sound so sharp it seemed to split the night. One of the hostile flashes vanished mid-burst, extinguished before it could pin Cross down. She slid behind the horseshoe-shaped rocks, breathless but alive. Ward felt his throat tighten. Whoever this sniper was, she wasn't guessing. She wasn't hoping. She knew. Next, Vega, 15 meters south to the fallen log. "Move on, my mark." Corporal Hayes swallowed hard, gripping his weapon. "Sir!" His eyes darted between Ward and the fog, the hesitation written plain on his face. Ward barked, "Do it! Go!" The mark came. Vega burst forward, boots kicking gravel. Another chorus of fire erupted from the west, but Serena's rifle cracked again and again. 2 shots in quick succession, each impossibly precise. The first enemy dropped before he could adjust his sights. The second froze mid-trigger, falling backward into the mist. Vega dove behind the log, alive by the grace of someone he had never seen. Ward poured suppressive fire into the ridge, but even as he did, he realized his rounds were a sideshow. The real battle was being fought from the unseen ridge, where Serena Hale was rewriting the rules of survival with every pull of her trigger. Ward knew the math. He had spent years working alongside some of the sharpest snipers alive. In clean weather, at optimal distance, they could hit targets beyond 1,000 meters. But tonight, the fog was thick enough to swallow sightlines. The wind gusted unpredictably through the valley, carrying the bite of mountain cold. Visibility was collapsing, and yet Serena Hale was calling out bearings and ranges as if she had a god's eye view of the field. "Hostile sniper, Western Ridge, 2,100 meters. Heat signature faint, shifting every 30 seconds. He dies first. The crack of her shot echoed an instant later. Through the night vision goggles, Ward caught the flicker of heat vanish from the ridge. One of the enemy's best assets erased in a single breath. Ward's stomach turned. This wasn't luck. No coin toss could account for shots at over 2,000 meters in these conditions. Every factor, wind, barometric pressure, bullet drop, had been calculated in her mind in less than a heartbeat. It was artistry. The team moved again and again. Each bound was part of a pattern only she could see. Ward, shift northeast, 25 meters to stone wall. Cross, cover him. Vega, ready suppression on bearing 045. Ward bolted, trusting her cadence more than his own. Bullets snapped around him, close enough to taste the air they shredded. But with every burst, Serena's voice was there, guiding, commanding. And with every crack of her rifle, another enemy fell, clearing lanes of survival like a conductor clearing notes in a score. The rhythm emerged. Move, cover, fire, silence. Then again. The SEALs weren't retreating anymore. They weren't pinned. They were being choreographed step by step into stronger ground. Ward realized something chilling. She wasn't just saving them. She was using them as pieces in her game. Every move they made forced the enemy to reveal themselves, and every reveal was punished instantly by her rifle. They were no longer fighting alone. They were part of her dance. At first, the hostile fire had been fierce, disciplined. Now it was uneven, hesitant. Ward recognized the shift immediately. He had seen it before in firefights where morale collapsed. The enemy wasn't just losing men, they were losing nerve. Whoever they were, they had expected to crush four-stranded SEALs. Instead, they were being dismantled by a ghost they couldn't see. Every soldier knew the terror of being hunted by a sniper. But this was something more. Serena was not just killing them, she was erasing them before they could even act. It was as if the night itself had turned against them. Ward crouched behind the new wall of stone, lungs burning. He stole a glance at his team. Cross looked steadier now, her confidence reinforced by every shot Serena fired. Vega clutched his rifle with a look that bordered on reverence, whispering under his breath, "She's real. She's actually real." Ward didn't respond. He couldn't. His mind was caught between disbelief and awe. 14 years of combat had taught him that survival often came down to luck. A lucky angle, a lucky ricochet, a lucky delay. But this was not luck. This was control. Every shot, every move, every calculation, Serena Hale was bending the battlefield to her will. Ward had always believed war was chaos, a storm you tried to ride without being swallowed. But tonight he was seeing something different. He was seeing someone conduct chaos itself like a symphony. And in that moment, Ethan Ward understood the truth. This was no myth, no ghost story whispered in team rooms. Serena Hale was real. She was out there in the fog, and she was a master. The dance of death belonged to her, and they were merely the partners she had chosen to keep alive. The last echoes of gunfire faded into the fog, leaving only the shallow rasp of breathing and the restless whisper of wind through the rocks. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Echo 9 Bravo wasn't under fire. No bullets snapped past their ears. No muzzle flashes winked in the mist. Only silence, thick, heavy, and disbelieving. Captain Ethan Ward pressed his back against the stone wall, forcing himself to steady his breathing. His body trembled with the come-down of adrenaline, but his mind refused to let go of the surreal truth. They were still alive. Somehow, impossibly, they had survived. Dana Cross slid down beside him, her rifle cradled across her lap. Sweat streaked her face, mingling with grime, but her eyes held a spark he hadn't seen since the mission began. She whispered, almost to herself, "That voice, it saved us." Lucas Vega Hayes crouched nearby, running a hand across his helmet as if checking that he was still real, still intact. Then under his breath, reverent and shaken, he murmured, "She's real. She's actually real." Ward didn't answer. His eyes scanned the ridgelines, half expecting another ambush. Yet the silence held. And in that silence, the enormity of what had just happened pressed on him like the weight of a mountain. The SEALs regrouped quickly, training taking over even as their minds reeled. They checked ammo, critically low. They patched minor wounds. They reassessed their position, but the truth was undeniable. Without that unseen sniper, they wouldn't be standing. Ward keyed his radio. Overwatch, this is Echo 9 Bravo. Do you copy? Only static. He tried again, switching frequencies. Nothing. Cross shook her head. She's gone. Gone just as suddenly as she had appeared. No farewell, no explanation. A phantom presence that had stepped into their fight, rewritten its ending, and vanished. Ward felt a mix of gratitude and unease. He wanted to thank her, to demand answers, to at least hear that calm voice one last time. Instead, he was left with silence, the kind that left too much room for questions. They began their cautious movement toward the extraction point, staying low, eyes sharp. The fog thinned as dawn's first light crept into the valley, painting the rocks in muted shades of gray. That was when Cross stopped short, her boot nudging something half buried in the dust. "Sir," she called softly, crouching. Ward moved to her side. At her feet lay a small, tattered piece of fabric, dark against the pale stone. She picked it up carefully, brushing away grit. It was a patch. Embroidered in black and silver thread was the image of a coiled dragon wrapped around a spear, its wings flaring wide. The edges were frayed, worn from years of use. It was no unit insignia Ward had ever seen officially recorded. His chest tightened. He had heard whispers, the same as every operator who spent time in the shadows. A division that didn't exist on paper, whose missions were never logged, whose operators moved like wraiths. They called it the Ghost Division, a name spoken more in rumor than in fact. Vega stepped closer, eyes wide. His voice dropped to a near whisper. Ko e tuk su ojai. Ward turned the patch over in his hand. It wasn't a keepsake. The fabric was scuffed, sweat-stained, the colors faded. This wasn't something left as decoration. This had been worn, used, and now it had been left behind. A signature, a message, proof. They gathered in a loose circle around the patch, each of them staring at it as though it might vanish if they blinked too long. Cross finally broke the silence. If this is what I think it is, she's one of them. Ghost Division. Vega shook his head, half in disbelief, half in awe. That's impossible. They don't exist. Ward closed his fist around the patch. Tell that to the men we just buried in this valley. Tell that to us. He met their eyes one by one. They had all felt it. The calculated precision of her shots, the authority in her voice, the way she had bent chaos into order. Ghosts weren't supposed to be real, and yet one had walked with them in the night. As they prepared for extraction, Ward lingered a step behind. His gaze lingered on the ridges, on the fog retreating under the first touch of sunlight. Somewhere out there, Serena Hale was dismantling her rifle, gathering her gear, and disappearing once more into shadows where no record would follow. He thought of how close they had come to death, of how fragile survival had been. And then he thought of her, steady, unseen, lethal, choosing to intervene when no one else would. Was it chance? Was it design? He didn't know. All he knew was that she had been here, and she had left them proof. Ward tucked the patch into his vest pocket, the embroidered dragon pressing against his chest like a heartbeat. A reminder, a warning, a promise. As the thump of rotor blades finally reached their ears and the extraction bird swooped low over the valley, Ward allowed himself one last glance at the battlefield. In daylight, it looked deceptively ordinary. Rocks, fog, silence. But he knew better. This ground would forever be marked not by their survival, but by the presence of someone who wasn't supposed to exist. That morning, as Echo 9 Bravo lifted off into the rising sun, each of them carried more than just scars and fatigue. They carried the weight of a legend confirmed, of a ghost made flesh. And in the quiet hum of the helicopter, Ward's hand never left the patch. Because deep down, he knew this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning of theirs. Months had passed since the night in the valley. For Echo 9 Bravo, life had returned to the routine grind of missions, training, and reports. Yet for Captain Ethan Ward, the silence left by that night lingered like an unfinished sentence. He would wake some nights hearing her voice, calm, steady, pulling them back from the brink. The patch he had found never left his possession. He kept it tucked in a vest pocket during missions, and at night it sat on his desk under the dim glow of a lamp. A black dragon coiled around a spear, its wings frayed with age. Every time he turned it over in his hand, he wondered, who was she, and why had she chosen to intervene that night? It was Vega who stumbled onto the first breadcrumb. One late evening, while combing through open-source intel for an upcoming operation, he noticed a Foundation name that appeared in several reports. Nothing flashy, no headlines, just a line item buried in financial disclosures. The Hale Initiative. It had quietly funneled resources to veteran causes, prosthetics research, scholarships for children of fallen soldiers, housing assistance for widows. There were no speeches, no media spotlights, just consistent, anonymous funding that made real differences in real lives. "Sir," Vega said, sliding the printout across Ward's desk, "you'll want to see this." Ward skimmed the lines. His pulse quickened at the name. "Hale," he murmured. The deeper they dug, the stranger it became. The Hale Initiative had no registered office, no listed board members. Donations were routed through shell companies, scattered across multiple countries, yet the pattern was unmistakable. Whoever ran it wasn't chasing profit or recognition. They were building a safety net for those the system too often forgot. Cross leaned over the documents, tapping one line. "Look here, this property purchase. Silver Creek. Isn't that—" Ward froze. Silver Creek, his hometown. His prayers whispered as a boy in the mountains. A coincidence? Or a signal meant for him? The realization hit with a quiet force. Serena Hale hadn't disappeared. She had simply shifted theaters. Weeks later, Ward sat in a dimly lit cafe in D.C., waiting on a contact from an intelligence analyst friend. The man slid a sealed envelope across the table without a word. Ward opened it, and there she was. A grainy surveillance still, Serena Hale stepping out of a nondescript building late at night, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. No rank, no uniform, no medals. Just the same steel in her eyes he had felt through the radio. "She doesn't exist," the analyst muttered. "No service record, no payroll trail. But the initiative, that's her. She funds it, runs it, keeps it invisible on purpose." Ward leaned back, exhaling slowly. She had chosen anonymity. She had chosen the shadows. And she was still fighting. Not with a rifle this time, but with resources, influence, and the same relentless will that had saved them. The discovery stirred something complicated in Ward. Pride because he had witnessed her brilliance firsthand. Gratitude because she had given his team life when no one else could. And unease because it forced him to confront a truth few in uniform wanted to admit. Some of the greatest warriors would never wear medals, never salute under spotlights, never be remembered in official histories. Serena Hale had traded recognition for impact. She didn't need parades. She needed results. At the next team meeting, Ward laid the documents out on the table. Cross's lips parted in quiet amazement. Vega whispered almost reverently, "She's still out there, just in a different way." Ward nodded. "She doesn't need us to chase her. She doesn't want that. What she's building, it's bigger than us, bigger than one mission. She's chosen her war." He touched the patch, now framed in glass beside the files. "And she's chosen to fight it her way." That night, alone in his quarters, Ward typed a message into a secure channel routed through dead servers. He didn't know if it would reach her. Maybe it was only for himself. "To Serena Hale, wherever you are. Echo 9. Bravo is alive because of you. We know we can never repay the debt, but we carry the mission forward. Thank you for reminding us what service really means." He hit send. No reply came, and he hadn't expected one. But as he leaned back, the weight of the patch still steady in his palm, Ward smiled faintly. Somewhere in the shadows of a world that rarely saw its quiet protectors, Serena Hale was still at work. Not for medals, not for glory, but for those who had no one else. And in that truth, Ward realized, her legend wasn't a myth at all. It was a promise. When the gunfire faded and the smoke cleared, Echo 9 Bravo carried more than just the memory of survival. They carried the presence of someone who should not have existed, yet did. Serena Hale, the ghost sniper. Her voice had been calm, her actions deliberate, her impact undeniable. And when she disappeared back into the shadows, she left behind a truth far greater than any battlefield victory. The truth is simple, but powerful. The most dangerous person in the room is often the quietest. Serena did not announce herself with rank or recognition. She didn't demand medals or headlines. Instead, she let her silence speak through precision, through actions that decided who lived and who didn't. She reminded us that power doesn't always come from volume or visibility. It often comes from discipline, patience, and the strength to act when others hesitate. This lesson reaches far beyond military corridors. In everyday life, we are surrounded by voices, some loud, some insistent, some commanding attention. But the ones we often overlook, the ones who listen more than they speak, can hold the wisdom or courage that changes everything. It may be the quiet coworker who sees the solution no one else noticed, the neighbor who steps in at the right moment, the family member who says little, but when they do, their words shape our choices. Serena Hale becomes more than a legend of the battlefield. She becomes a mirror for us to examine our own world. How often do we dismiss the silent, the overlooked, the underestimated? How often do we assume leadership wears stripes or that courage announces itself loudly? Her story reminds us that heroism often walks in quietly, does its work, and leaves without demanding applause. And yet, there is the haunting question left behind. Serena vanished, her patch the only proof she had stood with them. But legends have a way of outliving fact. Is she still out there watching other battlefields? Guiding others through chaos? We cannot know. What we can know is this: the echo of her respect, her discipline, and her silent strength continues. For you, watching this story, the question is personal. Who are the Serenas in your life? Who are the quiet ones you might be overlooking, the voices dismissed until they prove indispensable? And equally important, are you willing to be that person? The one who doesn't need recognition, but chooses to step forward when it matters most? If this story struck you, share your thoughts below. Do you believe legends like Serena still walk among us, unseen? Have you ever known someone whose silence carried more weight than 1,000 words? I want to hear your stories. And if you believe in honoring the overlooked, in uncovering hidden strength, and in sharing stories that challenge the way we judge others, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Join us as we continue to explore tales where quiet courage and silent strength change everything. Because sometimes the most unforgettable heroes are the ones we never even see.